What's up, everybody? It's Voter Critical. Colossal Dwarfare is more controversial than the inside of Moose's pants. I haven't even had time to finish streaming the DLC, and we have already got more twists and turns in this tale than an M. Night Shyamalan movie. So let me break it down for you, give you the brass tacks here, and open your third eye to the enigmatic inner machinations of the past 2 days worth of controversy. And after that, I've got a big secret to reveal at the end of this video that we've been cooking in the oven for about 2 years now. On January 30th, Ironhide Game Studio released the Colossal Dwarfare DLC for Kingdom Rush Alliance. The only two DLCs that they've ever released before then are the Hammerhold and Pirate Kings expansions in that order, which were both for Vengeance. Vengeance was already the black sheep of the Kingdom Rush games, but it managed to win a lot of people over by having some of the best overall content in the series packed into these DLCs. While I don't think that Hammerhold was on the same level as the Frontiers expansions, and consequently wouldn't call it worth the money, it was still a good expansion with memorable fun to be had. Meanwhile, Pirate Kings raised the bar by having so many new enemies and doing the first ever boss rush in the series. It left fans trusting Ironhide to release DLCs of this quality again, if not even higher, because the DLC did such a good job at creating dense, interesting content. The first Alliance DLC had to live up to this release, but it did not. While we shouldn't expect a boss rush for every DLC, it's certainly not too much to ask for the content in each level to have more density. Even the first stages of Hammerhold and Pirate Kings had an interesting mechanic going on, from the destructible towers to the cannon barrages, plus sneaky enemy spawners. In the first Colossal Dwarfare stage, the most interesting thing you can get is just the enemies themselves, which are pretty interesting in my opinion, but the level can't help but feel somewhat empty as a result. Even the extra enemy spawn locations don't really feel like environmental features. In every practical sense, they are effectively just a path that enemies start spawning from later in the level than the rest of the paths, and not even that much later at that. On top of this, the later levels feel about on par with the free levels throughout the series. I would argue that nothing in this DLC is as cool or impactful as the full moon in Shadow Moon or even the tower consumption in Starving Hollow. So all of this is to say that I can see where people are coming from in their disappointment with Colossal Dwarfare when held up to the standards of a DLC that Ironhide's previous expansions have set. All that being said, the reaction from the community has, in my opinion, failed to capture the actual issues with the DLC that I just laid out. The crux of my criticism is disappointment with something that we have to pay extra for. I think the vast majority of fans prefer the free content that we got from Ancient Hunger, and yet, the reviews on Steam are tackling an entirely different concept. The Steam reviews have actually averaged out to mostly negative for the DLC. Now, the top recent reviews of the DLC made some actually good points, saying basically what I was saying throughout this video. But if you scroll down and see the rest of these reviews, there's a common trend that I disagree with wholeheartedly. Enemy stats are too high. The enemies are too strong to handle. The levels aren't worth going back to for 3 stars. In other words, reviews are saying that the DLC is too hard. That is a criticism I never thought I'd hear for a DLC, but let's take a moment to talk about this objectively, or at least as close to objectively as we can get. First, Ironhide is no stranger to negative reviews from people who had trouble with the game. They even respond to negative reviews sometimes by saying that they've uploaded strategy guides to help players out. They confidently rejected the player's reality, knowing that the content was actually not too hard. Second, DLC or not, a strategy game should probably always be hard. I can't say that for certain since anything should be possible in a creative medium, but I cannot think of a situation where a strategy game would be more thought-provoking, more interesting, and more rewarding by making it easier. On the contrary, I think difficulty encourages you to actually care about what you're doing, since you need effort in order to win. If the difficulty was purely down to micro or luck, I would see where they're coming from. However, it's not. In fact, I know what the problem with the difficulty is. The issue that I noticed with all of my friends in the beta test of this DLC compared to me was that they struggled the hardest whenever they used off-meta towers. Elven Stargazer, Battle Brewmasters, Twilight Longbows, and all the other usual victims of people's tier lists are just not viable here. If you try to force your strategy to work with them, you'll end up being forced to let the heroes carry more of the work because you just don't have the utility or raw power to handle things. But if you play it with the meta towers like Eldritch Channeler, Arcane Wizard, Arborean Emissary, Paladin Covenant, Tri-Cannon, etc., you will find that everything plays out pretty smoothly. There are tricky enemies that you still have to respond to with Micro, but that's been the case since Kingdom Rush 1. I would argue that the difficulty is not too high, but rather, some towers are just too weak or don't have the right combinations of strengths to actually be viable here. In fact, I would go as far as to say that it's good to have really difficult stages so that they can actually expose the differences in hero and tower viability like this. However, Ironhide seems to have reacted in pretty much the opposite way to how they always have to feedback about difficulty. Not even 24 hours ago, people were discovering nerfs to enemies, reducing the HP of Darksters from 500 to 450, Flying Sentries from 290 to 200, and Scrap Drones from 120 to 60, all on Impossible. Shielders and Guardians give more gold, and the iconic feature of the Raging Hulk, becoming faster and unblockable at low HP, now has save nodes. What's crazy to me is that Ironhide is indeed listening to criticism and reacting to it, but for the second time in a row now, it feels like they are choosing the worst possible criticism to listen to. I pointed out in my Starving Hollow video that I would like to see a mechanic that doesn't rely on RNG nor strip so much power away from towers. They themselves stated that they had another mechanic in mind that used an algorithm, but instead, they reworked the level by finding a different way to still make it RNG based. And now with Colossal Dwarfare, they looked past the reviews talking about how the content itself is disappointing for a DLC, and even for an expansion in some ways, and instead focused on appealing to the criticism that they have always known better than to listen to for the entirety of their time as a company, until today. It feels unreal, to be honest. Part of me wants to say that this is some four-dimensional mind game where they're trying to teach people to stop asking Ironhide to listen to fans, which for one is a paradox, and two is a gross overgeneralization of the situation. I think the more likely explanation is that the reviews were coming in fast and lethal, so Ironhide wanted to do whatever the quickest fix was as a means of damage control, and in this case it was to nerf the enemies. Quite frankly, I don't like the look of this. It makes Ironhide look weak, like they don't have enough faith in their own designs that they would make a quick patch to the difficulty just because of some early negative reviews. Surely they know that this is par for the course, and that people will complain less and less about the difficulty as time goes on. The sensible feedback seems overlooked, when in the past this was never the case. What happened to the days of favorite customer getting reworked to no longer be RNG based? If they focused more on criticisms like that, maybe we'd finally get the encyclopedia. Maybe we'd finally get bug fixes. Maybe we'd finally get more significant balance changes. Ironically, balance changes probably would have mitigated some of the criticisms about the difficulty. Anyways, call it copium, but I don't think this is a nail in the coffin for Ironhide or Alliance. I would call this more weird than incriminating. Ironhide will probably bounce back from this and cook up some more quality content. Like I said before, these levels are just disappointing for DLC standards. I think they're still fine to play if you stop thinking about their price, and this is coming from someone who just a few days ago felt drained playing the rework of Starving Hollow. With all of that out of the way, I am so excited to announce that there will be actual quality content on its way. For the past 2 years, Max Springer, with the help of Fifu, Rimcar, and Plague Knight, have modded in new content for Kingdom Rush 1. It's coming very soon, but all I can share with you right now is the following teaser.